Okay, back to working on the truck today. I'm going to try and sort out this shift linkage, and I'm going to do a much more systematic approach to working on it here, because what I was doing the other day was a little bit too much of a kind of a, futzing around and hoping it worked. So what I'm going to try and do is eliminate, as many variables as possible and just try and work with what I need to change to make it work right. I'll crawl underneath and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so here's the linkage, and here's the three adjustments that you have. You have this distance, the throw, the length of the shaft, and the position of this spline on the shaft here. And what I got to do is, because changing three values, when you change one value, you always seem to change another one. So what I think I have to do is I have to try and isolate this a bit so that it's not so difficult to set this up. And a couple of things occurred to me. One thing is that this shaft location actually is kind of fixed because, well, this is twisted a bit. Here, let me see if I can turn that around. I did have to put a little bit of a bend in that so that it would align correctly. Yeah, actually, I had to turn it around a bit. Anyways, oops. There we go. Let's try again. So, if you look at it in this position, it should be, oops. Should be, well, that actually is park right there. I'll just confirm that. That's park. And if you look at it that way, that would never work because you're actually pushing on the shaft. So, okay, so what you need is you need somewhat of an angle on this thing. Otherwise, it'll take far too much pressure to move the shift linkage down. Because if this is straight out like that, straight in line with this, there's no way it can actually torque and push this to the next location down here. So there's kind of a fixed location for where we can put this, shift actuator shaft. Now, so I can actually set that in that position or a position similar to that and call that, steady, and work with everything else from that point on. Because what you can do is, or what the other two settings do, is this setting here adjusts the spacing between the detents on the column, or how they appear on the column. The shaft length, all it does is it just sets the 0 position for it. So actually I can leave the shaft length until the end when I'm done to set, like the proper location to park once I get the spacing right. So actually I can narrow this down to the point where I set this location now, call that done, as long as I can work through all the gears all the way down, because you can counter the opposite problem once it gets too low. We can have a quick look at that. So that's park, reverse, neutral, overdrive, third, second count, and first right there. And that's the bottom location. If you look, the shaft is still at a pretty good angle. It's not quite perpendicular, but it's as good as it's going to get. So it still is be able to apply torque, so I can pull it back with the shift lever with minimal effort and back up into park. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to leave that in that position. I could probably even almost drop it down a little bit, but I think what I'll do is I'll leave it at that and just call it good enough, because like I said, I don't want to futz too much with the setting. That's probably one of the least important ones from the point of view of setting up the linkage correctly. So I'm going to put that on, torque this down. I'll probably have to loosen this off so I can get a little bit more space out of that. And we'll go from there. Okay, since we're looking at being systematic about this, you can kind of somewhat logically analyze how this linkage works. Now I'm trying to set the spacing between the settings on the unit here, so that the pointer will roughly correspond to where I want it to be. Now it's in park. Now you'll notice that it's probably tilted over a little bit like that. We'll leave that until last because we'll adjust that with the shaft length. So what we're going to do now is we're going to see what the spacing actually is between shift points, and we can adjust it accordingly. Now, how that works is if you actually look at this, the closer this bolt is into the inside of the, or to the pivot point of the transmission shift selector, is the smaller the distance is going to be between points on that indicator, and the further out it is, the larger the gap is going to be. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to try and shift it and just see how far off it is. Okay, so I don't quite have it 100% here, but I put the pointer indicator in here just so that it was a little bit easier and more obvious to show where the location of it was. And unfortunately, it almost looks on the screen like it's actually almost in reverse, but in actual fact, I'm lined up with park pretty much. But like I said, I'll set that 0 point when the time comes. Right now, I'm just trying to establish the position. And I'm noticing something here, that with the proper shift lever in place, yeah, it's really difficult to pull it out of park. So I think what I'm going to have to do before I get too far into this is I think I'm going to have to adjust this shaft, or this actuator arm, down a bit so it has a little bit better angle on it. It will mean that for low, it's going to be, you know, suboptimal angle on it, but the reality is this is probably the tightest detent of them all, and it's going to be the most frequently used detent, so if it's hard to pull it out of park, it's going to be really annoying. But if it's hard to get into first, you know, the 1 in 10 times that you might ever possibly want to do it, I think you're going to not be too worried about it. So I'm going to adjust this, bring it down a bit, and we'll go from there. Now that is going to screw up my start point here a bit, but that's okay. Like I said before, we'll worry about the zero adjust, or the park position adjust, when we get to that point. Okay, so I've repositioned the actuator arm, and actually in the instructions it does say to position it roughly at 8 o'clock, which is about what that is. It's probably more like 8:30, but whatever. I discovered another problem with my linkage here. I'll show it to you. I'll go up top and I'll show it to you. Okay, it goes as such. Now we're in park right now on both ends, and the shift rod actually matches up fairly well with the arm down there. But because of this shift arm up top here, the way it's set up, it actually changes the geometry quite dramatically as you rotate it down and through, and I'll show you what I mean. So now you can see that that sits about where I'd want it to, like I said. But as you move it down, this actually is rotating that way, you know, from the point of view of the shaft, and it's actually binding in these Heim joints here. So, you know, for something that I thought would have had a lot of motion to it, they don't, and consequently, it's gonna, I can't actually make it connect up with the arm at that point. So what I think I'm going to do is, I don't know if this was the way it was supposed to be, or if it was maybe bent at some point, and I just never thought any different of it, but I'm going to bend this arm here so it's mostly pretty much straight. It's probably going to mean I'm going to crack and mess up my paint, but I'd rather redo the paint than, you know, have something that doesn't work. So I'm going to get to that and try that. Maybe it'll improve things a little bit in terms of the shaft length. I was saying it seemed almost too short. Okay, so I've straightened this arm out, or at least made it perpendicular. The paint is kind of lifting off now down here because now I bent a bit, knocked a bit off there, but I'll touch it up by hand. Got to touch up that bolt anyways, or do that bolt. Actually, I need a shorter bolt by about 3/4 inch. Boy, that shows you how easy I get distracted. Holy cow. Any wonder that I don't get anything done. Okay, but if you can see down there, it's really hard for me to tell on the camera screen here, but you can see it's meeting up quite nicely with where the shift arm is down there. And if I move this down through the full range of its motion, down to the full range of its motion, you can see it still is more or less where I want it to be on there. It doesn't seem to want to bind, so that was the right call to straighten out that piece there, even if it messed up my paint a bit here. So, Another fine example of test fitting everything together and getting it all working before you get to the point of paint. But hey, such as it is, live and learn. Okay, so I got the linkage all set up to the right distance. You guys might laugh when you hear this, but the right position for each shift point to drop between right on a number was all the way to the end. So anybody who might have done this before is probably laughing because they knew that right all the way along. It's also improved things for my shift rod. I remember saying something about that I thought it needed to be about an inch longer, and now it actually seems like it might need to be about half an inch shorter. So I'm just trying to set things up so that I can get my park point to line up and actually be parked. Like right now that's lining up with park and it's actually in reverse right now. So I've got to, and this is the lock point for the shifter. So I'm gonna pull that connector off, take the shaft off, and see if I can shorten it a bit. Or yeah, the push rod, whatever you want to call this bit here. Right there, the stainless steel rod. So anyways, I'll get to that and we'll see where we go from there. Okay, so it's pretty much all set up. One more painful thing that I have to do. You'll notice that the set screws aren't in here. And that's because I have to actually take this shaft back out. I'll have to mark these, take the shaft out, and then grind some flats in there for the set screws, which is going to be a bit of a pain in the ass because this is pretty tight in there. But such as it is, everything is all pretty much adjusted where I want it to be. I was actually using the position of the shaft on here so that I just moved it down a bit so I didn't have to cut the stainless steel shaft length. And I've got it all set up so that park is right exactly where the shift lever would be locked in. And so I'm going to start putting this thing back together and get the indicator in, get my wires in here, and then I can probably put that part together almost permanently. I've just got a bolt loosely holding it in here. You can see I've chipped the paint and all the time I've been farting around here, but I can touch those up fairly easily. But regardless, so I'm going to set that up, get that shaft done permanently, and then I think, I don't know what time it is. It's only actually 2:30 right now, but I'm going to get that done, get everything all set up and lined up. Hopefully the numbers are going to roughly align in here. And like there isn't much choice of anything because, like I said, the detent in here is determining where the pointer is going to sit. So hopefully that's going to be where it's supposed to be. Well, I was hoping that I could reuse this turn signal and emergency hazard switch setup from the van because it's actually in pretty good shape, but unfortunately just the plastics are just too different on the back, and the old one is just a little too rough, and the wires are damaged. Actually, I could redo the wires in it, but I don't think it's worth it. So I think I'm going to have to order one of these, so I'm not going to be reassembling the column quite yet. And I did kind of loosely put some of the pieces together here, and I'm noticing that I'm not quite there with my scale adjustment on the arm. All the way out doesn't quite work, because that's first, and if we go to park, park seems to be way over there. So I'm going to adjust the scale a bit and see if we can improve things a bit and get things to line up a little bit better. Anyways, I thought that was a little funny. Okay, so I think I've got the shifter mechanism about where I want it to be. I ended up cutting 1.25 inches off of the stainless steel rod there. I probably should have cut something like either 3/4 or maybe even 1 inch off, but it's not going to be too bad. I still got full. I can still get a full bite with both those set screws there, so it's not a big deal. I got it more or less where I want it to. The park is a little bit off to the far left, but it's not too big a deal. It's a little stiff. There's reverse. You can see it lines up well with that. There's neutral, it lines up if I get the camera more or less where it's supposed to be. Same again for overdrive, third, second, and first is a little bit far over as well, but I think that I'm fine with that. That's probably it for today. I'm going to grind flats on that shaft where it is right now. I'll take it out again one more final time. I'll mark the position of everything, and that'll be it. But yeah, I think that's it for tonight, and then I'm going to consider this done and move on to something else. I don't know what. Well, actually, I know what I'm going to be working on. I'm going to probably have to move that F350 in here and start working on it. I was planning on moving it in here today, but it's not working out that it's going to happen. So I'll do it tomorrow. I also got to take the snowblower off the tractor and on and on and on. Lots of fun stuff here. Yeah, you got a good viewpoint of me there with the light behind me. I guess that's it, guys. Later.